What does it mean to tap into and awaken the highest potential of community? That's what we're going to talk about in this video. If we haven't met, I'm John Berghoff. I'm the founder at Exchange, and we have trained tens of thousands of change agents of different types to design and facilitate experiences that tap into the true potential of community. I'm going to share 6 questions with you today. And through these questions, whether you lead a community or you're a part of an organization that does, you can use these questions on your own or as a team to help you think about how you tap into the highest potential of community. Now, first, I have to give a disclaimer. While we have a tremendous amount of experience, my perspective is often contrary or even a little bit controversial when contrasting what I'm going to say with how a lot of people talk about community. For example, in this day and age, we often talk about and think about community as some sort of form of digital connectedness. And while there can be a relationship between how digitally connected we are and the experience of community, in many cases, what I see is conversation about community that to us could actually be more harmful than helpful, because we're so distracted by superficial definitions of community. Just as an example, it is often referred to community by people talking about how many followers they have. I see this with my kids. They're fixated on this idea of how much attention can we get online. This is the world we live in. And I worry that they're gonna go all the way through their education and no one's gonna teach them about how to attune to the human beings right in front of them. And I like to think to myself, maybe what we need to ask is not how many followers do we have, but what does it mean to be in fellowship with each other? And what's ironic is that so much of what is causing harm in our world today can potentially be remedied, healed with this antidote, which is community. Community is the original human technology. So my first question is, what is your relationship with community? I want to tell you a story of a friend of mine by the name of John Vroman. Years ago, a little over a decade ago, John had a young family, 2 boys, Ocean and Tiger, who were toddlers at the time. And he wanted to find a group of men that he could talk with, not just about being an entrepreneur, which he was, but about how to be a great father, how to be a great family man, and to not confuse his priorities. Well, the bottom line is he couldn't find the space that had the values he wanted, so he created it. And today, years later, this is a thriving global community of entrepreneurial men called Front Row Dads. Now, one of the things about John's story that I think is noteworthy is not just that he created what he was looking for, but John was not just the leader of this community in some sort of detached way. He's as much a student learning from the members of the community today as he was 10 years ago. I share that story with you because I believe that it's important for us to ask, what is our personal relationship with community? You see, maybe you have some positive experiences to reflect on and learn from, or you may be like me, in that even while today I have many positive experiences of community, my most meaningful learning came from over 25 years ago. Between 6th grade and my freshman year in high school, my parents moved from one town to another. And because of how the school lines were drawn on the map, I was in and out of 4 different schools within a 5-year span. Now, without telling you the whole story, my guess is you may be able to imagine that was a very painful time for me. In fact, so much so that even today, when I pause, when I get quiet and still, and I reflect on what truly motivates me to create the experience of community, it's the healing that I'm still looking for from the most painful time in my past. I encourage you to ask yourself, what are the experiences that you've had that can serve as fuel, motivation, inspiration, or even just insight if you're going to be somebody who supports community for others? The second question I invite you to consider, what are the forces in our world today that are really calling upon us to create this experience of community. Back in 2019, I and our team, we were invited to go down to Tulum, Mexico, and to design and facilitate the Global Coherence Conference for an organization called the HeartMath Institute. Now, we're a big fan of their work. It was a tremendous honor. And when we got to their conference, what amazed me was that instead of the founders of HeartMath simply standing on the stage and telling everybody why the world needed their community right now, they actually did almost the opposite. Instead of asserting, they presented a question to the room. They asked the room, why do you see the world needs our community right now? But they didn't just present it in some rhetorical way. They presented the question and they gave space for a collective conversation. And they even allowed the group to discover and to co-create their own shared answers to why does the world need us here? Now that story is one example of inviting a community to discover its higher purpose together. But if we take a step back, my guess is that the only reason you're even watching this video is because you can already see, hear, and feel that there is a major need in our world right now for this thing called community. We've surveyed over 20,000 of our students in the last 5 years, and when we ask them, how would you describe and define this moment in time? The answers are exactly what you'd expect. This is a time of chaos. It's a time of uncertainty, disruption. It's unsettling. Some suggest that our world is changing faster than humans are equipped to adapt to that change. And so with those conditions being true, maybe it's the case that inviting a healthy experience of community is not just a good business model, but maybe it's the most important antidote. It is the remedy. It could be the greatest source of resilience or even healing in so many different environments today. I encourage you to keep asking, what is it in our world that is inviting us to create the experience of community? Because the degree to which we stay connected to that higher need, we will be able to bring that higher sense of purpose into any space that we work within. The third question I want to bring you to is a really practical question. What is the essence of community? Because we can talk about business models, we can talk about social media networks and numbers of followers, but here at Exchange, we see community as something that we create the conditions for that ultimately is an emergent property. We could talk about community as a model of a living system and all the lessons we could learn from that, but let's actually make this really practical just for now in answering this question. And the way I want to do it is by sharing a story with you of one of the greatest community builders I've ever worked with, and his name is Jason Gaynard. Jason had previously come through some of our trainings. He then invited me to come to one of his annual events known as MMT, short for Mastermind Talks. Now, MMT is a very highly curated group of entrepreneurs from all around the world. Now, Jason may not be known to you, but to many founders in the entrepreneurial space, they know Jason very well. And I want to tell you the story of the first night at the first event of Jason's that I've ever experienced. You see, Jason welcomed everybody to the event in the ballroom. He then went on to explain that our only programming for that night was going to be a dinner that we would have in groups of 6. He then sent us off to our dinner table, and as I sat down at the table, I immediately learned several lessons from Jason. You see, Jason, number one, had curated who was seated next to who. With over 200 attendees, he put in the time, and this was before people were using AI to help with this curation, by hand. He made sure that the right people were seated near the right people. But that's not it. That's just the start. See, Jason understands that we unlock community and the culture through the structures of what we do. The fundamental structures of community are who's talking with who and what are we talking about. So he also had curated at the table a set of conversation questions. Now, he didn't do this in some sort of haphazard, lazy way. You could tell that Jason had done tremendous work in thinking about what are the types of questions that are going to invite a group of 6 to really go deep. But I want to tell you one more thing about this dinner conversation, because to this day, when we host our community events or when we're hired by another organization, we emulate something that I learned from Jason, which is when hosting these dinner conversations, there is a key to making sure that at the table we are having one conversation. And the key is 48-inch round tables. Now, you might think, I don't understand. What does that have to do with this? Well, if you're not aware, a typical hotel banquet table will usually be 60 or 72 inches in diameter. But the problem is, a table of that size is not conducive to a group having one conversation. Because of the space, it creates a tension in the ability for everybody to have one conversation. Whereas when everybody's a little bit closer, it reminds us that the culture of a community follows the structures of what we're doing. Now, as we continue to talk about not only these questions, but the stories and the lessons, I invite you to just hold in the back of your mind that essential understanding of community as an experience that we can design and facilitate through how we come together. Here's the next question I want to introduce you to. What are the patterns of communities that are at their best when they get together? So what I want to talk about here are some patterns that are really a bridge between the visible and the invisible. You know, this is a principle that's true in nature. It's true when we bring groups of people together. There are processes and structures that we use to design and guide groups, but there's ultimately what's happening below the surface that is invisible that makes everything matter that is visible. So that's what we're going to talk about here. I'm going to share a framework with you by drawing a picture to help answer this question. What are the patterns of healthy community at their best? This framework that I'm going to draw is a result of over 10 years of designing and facilitating different types of community experiences. And at one point, eventually trying to find an answer to this question. And it really comes down to two things. You've heard us allude to the idea of belonging. And this question of do I belong is fundamental. And we're going to come back and talk about two contributions to the idea of belonging. And then there's also another question, which is how do I behave? All right. And we're going to come back and we're going to talk about a very specific outcome that we want to create when we bring people together, which creates a certain behavioral pattern. By the way, I'll just let you in on it right now, that the underlying question when it comes to behavior in a community, healthy behavior, is it's all about how do we design the right cycles of giving and receiving. So we'll come back and talk about what are these 4 buckets that contribute to these 2 questions. But I want to make something crystal clear. Community can be something that happens by accident, by default. By thinking, you know, if we just invite some good people into a room, good things can happen. By the way, good things can happen, but I don't know about you. To me, that sounds like leaving a lot to chance. So for the remainder of this video, as we unpack what does it mean to create belonging and how do we enable healthy behavior, there is a science to this. By the way, I want to share a story with you of one organization that I think understands this maybe more than any other professional learning association we've ever worked with. And this is the Women Presidents Organization. But Women Presidents Organization does something that, in my opinion, none of the others do. And that is they invest a level of attention and time and resources into one particular group, and this is the chapter chairs for the Women Presidents Organization. Now, we had the privilege for several years of training nearly 100 of these chapter chairs. And I'll tell you something, not only are these chapter chairs in their own right deeply inspiring professional women leaders, but the fact that the organization understands that the capacity of these chapter chairs will ultimately reflect into the quality of their chapter gatherings, which is ultimately what creates community. I've never seen an organization invest into their chapters the way WPO invests into their chapter chairs. And you see that through the ways they come together, through the ways they do knowledge sharing. And the reason to me that is such an important lesson is because if we want to scale up the experience of community, we have to have a core group that understands how to unlock that essence of community the way Women Presidents Organization still does today. I would like to bring two more questions to you. So the first one is, what does it really mean to belong in a healthy community? I'm going to share a story of an event that we had the privilege to lead, the CEO Summit for Conscious Capitalism. In the first year that we led the event, we hosted an optional pre-event gathering. And the pre-event gathering was a lightly facilitated networking experience, although I think we probably called it a pre-conference connection activity. And we had about 75 or 80 participants who were in this pre-conference connection activity. And the activity was actually pretty simple. We led an experience known as the Thanksgiving Address, where we invite participants who are coming into an event or a gathering in an almost ceremonial way in small groups to get to know each other by expressing with each other what they are thankful for. Now, even in a room full of CEOs, this is a really wise way for us to start if the goal is just for people to regulate their nervous systems together, to get to feel a sense of I'm safe, I'm at home, I can be who I am and be a part of this group. And when it was complete, we handed microphones out in the room and we just invited the participants to express anything they wanted to express if they wanted to. And one of the gentlemen who grabbed the microphone, who I later found out was a very prominent, successful businessman, his name was Gervais Warner. And Gervais took the microphone, stood up, turned to 75 people who he had just met, a number of them for the first time. And he said the following. He said, when I walked into this room this morning, I wasn't quite sure what to think or how I felt. But the experience we just had told me two things. And I'll always remember this moment because as a facilitator, moments like this, for me, they stick. He said, number one, I could tell that I can be who I am and be a part of this community. And he said, number two, I now know that I am home. If somebody who's participating in an event, before the main event has even started, stands up and acknowledges what I just shared with you in front of their peers, do you think that that can now tilt the remainder of the room on its axis? It sure does have an influence on how everybody feels in that moment. But that story is really an example of what it is that creates belonging. And so I want to unpack for a moment. There's two fundamental levers that create a connection to belonging. And the first, through Gervais's example, actually has to do with safety. And we often refer to psychological safety, but I think psychological safety can be misunderstood because it's not just some idea that lives in our head. True safety is actually something that lives in our neurobiology. It's about a regulated nervous system. Every single human being is asking some version of the question, can I be who I am and still fit in with whoever this group is? When we design and facilitate experiences where people connect in a certain way, their biology now knows that the answer is yes. And that's one contribution to do I belong? But Gervais was also acknowledging he felt like he was home because he also was feeling connected to a bigger story. And that story is about being connected to a bigger purpose, a transcendent purpose. So in our different community gatherings, a leader of a community can tell the room why it's important that we're here. But to me, that's just coercion disguised as a nice offering. Or we can ask the room. When we not only ask a room what is our bigger reason for being here, but we create space for them to hear each other's answers, that higher purpose starts to come alive. In the case of conscious capitalism, for years, as the facilitator, I wouldn't stand there and tell the room why it was important to be there. We would ask them and leave room for that conversation to surface the authentic answer to what is our shared story for being in this room. So these are just a few of the contributions to belonging. Yes, it's biological. Yes, it's mythological. And don't forget, it's deeply practical. Let's talk now about the next question. And my final question in this video, what does it mean to create healthy behavior in a communal setting? Now, this is where I want to share with you lessons that we can take from Mother Nature, from a living system herself. But I also want to give you a couple examples coming up from an event that I'm going to lead in. Actually, it's next week. A good friend of mine, Dr. Benjamin Hardy, who's an organizational psychologist and a prolific best-selling author, in the last year published a book called The Science of Scaling. And he reached out to myself and our team and said, John, we're going to put on a conference for our members and we want you to lead this conference. So you may have heard me mention this earlier, that healthy behavior is about cycles of giving and receiving. In the giving and receiving, there's two types. One is there's sharing of value between members. I didn't acknowledge this earlier, but this horizontal axis represents how members of a group relate to each other, member to member relationship. This vertical axis represents how do the members relate with the community. It's a vertical relationship. So going back, do we connect them with each other in ways where they feel safe? Do we connect them with the bigger story of the community where they understand that this is their home? Do we enable them to share solutions, resources, opportunities, ideas, lessons with each other? But then there's another form of a cycle of giving and receiving, which is called stewardship, which is knowing how to create different ways for your members to actually give back to the entire community. So let me give you an example of what we're doing at Dr. Benjamin Hardy's upcoming event on the science of scaling. When his team hired us to lead this event, we asked them, what's important to you? And what's important is not only will the room learn from Ben and his co-author Blake, and they'll learn from a select number of speakers and experts who are going to be brought up on the stage, but it was really important to their team that the participants also learn from each other. And if you think about this idea, their book is called The Science of Scaling. What's interesting is there's actually an exponential intelligence that's available in a room when we have a tool set, a skill set that is scalable in and of itself. And it's how we design and facilitate different ways for participants to give and receive, not only with each other, but also with the entire group. So I'll give you two examples. One activity that we'll be facilitating interspersed over 2 days is an activity that we refer to as wisdom circles. But before you think that wisdom circles are the solution to giving and receiving value, you have to understand that, number one, there's multiple choreographies. We teach 6 of them in our certifications, but there's even more ways to design and facilitate peer-to-peer learning than just this one example. And ultimately, every community should actually arrive at and design their unique configuration to how is value given and received. But from a design principle standpoint, if we want to make sure value is given and received, we've got to make sure there's time where that's happening that we design and facilitate. It can't be left to chance or to meals or over a bathroom break in the afternoon. So in the case of Ben's event, twice we'll be facilitating an experience where the learners become teachers, the room becomes the stage, and we curate groups of 4 where they become peer coaches and mentors to each other as it relates to how they are applying the lessons that they are learning from Ben and his co-author Blake. Now, that's one example of giving and receiving value to each other that for many in the room, that will be one of the most meaningful sources of value of the event. But let me give you one more example. At one point, maybe 2 times during the event, we're actually going to be inviting participants to come up on the stage and just give back by sharing their own learnings with the entire room. And we have an interesting way that we do it where these panels are not always predetermined or pre-assigned, but we actually crowdsource from the room, hey, who have you met over the last day that you think should come up on the stage and share with everybody else? Now that's a bit of an aside, but the idea that we're inviting the members of the community to come up and give back to everybody in the room is one expression of stewardship. Okay, so this last question, how do we create the conditions for healthy behavior. It's about designing and facilitating pathways for peers to learn from each other. It's also about developing rituals and rhythms where that learning and support is regimented into how groups come together. At the end of the day, these 6 questions are a starting point. They may not reveal every answer that you need to build healthy community, but they can be a good start. Let me know what you thought. Let me know what helps. Let me know what questions this video leaves unanswered for you. I'll pay close attention as we look at maybe the next video that we will put out. Take good care. Cheers.